Remember when infidelity would keep you from being a president?
Who would have thunk? Gone are the days of chivalry.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Today's Movie Verdicts episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. Like, dare I say, George Washington's first cabinet. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Winning was easy, young man. Governing is harder. It's time for Hamilton.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter, by being a self-starter. To your union and the hope that you provide. May you always be satisfied.
This is Hamilton.
Welcome, everybody, to, I don't know, is this officially season 2? Is that the way they do it now? We did season 1 and took a little break, and now we're episode 1 of season 2 to Movie Verdicts. And
How about that COVID cliffhanger?
That's right. For the summer, whenever on hiatus. And now we're back in the fall here. And we've got a great show today. Excited about it. Robert Callahan is back with us. Baylor Law's finest.
Yes.
Robert Callahan.
Yes.
Waco criminal lawyer extraordinaire, Robert Callahan. Tip of the spear, racial and social justice, Robert Callahan. And just a warm welcome back. It's good to see you. We've obviously been talking throughout the summer, but I know it's been a challenging time for you, for everyone, around the issues really since George Floyd, but it predates that, obviously. And so, I just wanted to say how much I love you, how much we love you, and appreciate all that you've been doing. And taking, I think, an extraordinary burden on yourself personally and on your family to speak up for others and to advocate for others who don't have the voice that you do. And we're proud of you. We are just praying for you. And we're with you, and we're here with you, and we are always here with you. And so thank you for all that you're doing, and thank you for taking the time to come back and do this and be with us today. So we're just thrilled to have you.
Wow. Thank you. I feel like
well, my eyes are welled a little.
I do.
Adrienne's eyes are welled a little. And we're going to keep it together, but we just appreciate you so much. And yeah.
Well, thank you. And turnabout is fair play. Ladies and gentlemen, you could have been anywhere in the world, but here you are on Varsity Search. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you a man who never dresses like fake royalty or smells like new money. It's Adrienne Hare. Woo-hoo.
That's the intro right there.
And a woman that was looking for a mind at work, but instead got her husband.
Just don't let me be Peggy.
Adrienne
Don't let me be Peggy.
No, Peggy's sitting over there. And Peggy. Oh, thanks, man. No, we're here to do a special episode of Movie Verdicts. We are going to dive into Hamilton today. It officially became a movie on July 4th weekend, I think.
No. It was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when it
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it became, I think, officially eligible to be discussed on this podcast,
Midnight.
but we weren't quite sure. So I put out a LinkedIn poll a couple of weeks ago, and I asked the question, basically, hey, does Hamilton qualify as a legal or a lawyer movie in order to be on the show? And we've done, obviously, 6 or so movies up till now, all of kind of the traditional lawyer or legal variety. This was be different. And the answers available were absolutely yes, yes, I could make a case for yes, and no, but do it anyway. So obviously I stacked that poll a little bit in favor of we're just going to do this. And so it's just a matter of whether or not anyone thinks it's a good idea. But the breakdown's interesting. So we had 33% said absolutely yes. And 10% said yes, 33% said case for yes, and 24% said no, but do it anyway. So
What do we know about
3/4
the
basically said, sorry?
What do we know about the evangelical vote?
Yeah. I haven't done the crosstabs on this poll here to see kind of how it broke out. But nevertheless, we appreciate everyone's responding to that poll. And here we are to enjoy and spend time with Hamilton, which was, I don't know about for you guys, it was super fun to go back, watch it. We had watched it when it first came out. Adrienne's seen it live in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
And so I've not seen it live, but have now seen it a second time through on the stream. And I don't know, I would love to just get, Robert, your initial just thoughts as you've been watching it, listening to it. Just what are a couple of things that you enjoy or appreciate about Hamilton?
Well, now, before we get there, we can't just breeze by something you just said. Adrienne's seen it live in Chicago,
Yes.
and you haven't.
No.
How long have y'all been married?
To 12 years. How long have we
Yeah.
been
All right.
married?
So let's we're gonna start there.
how
All right,
about it?
Adrienne,
Well,
go for it.
on one
Let's
of
tell
my
the story.
many trips without my husband, now I actually was sent for work several years ago to a conference, a legal conference, actually.
It was an ABA thing, right?
It was a law negotiation competition that they do in the ABA.
It was ABA, yeah.
Legal. I don't know the technical term of it because I was a coordinator for a negotiation competition that our business school does at Baylor. And it hadn't been around very long. And they said, there's a law competition that the ABA does that's really good. And it's like, the best of the best. And they come from all over the country, and these law schools duke it out. And we want to continue to make ours better. It's a business negotiation competition where they pitch a business. And they have to negotiate, they get a problem and they have to negotiate a deal. And so we were able to find really, really cheap flights to Chicago. And they were like, hey, why don't you go to this law competition? And I just went to observe. So I didn't go to any of the things that they do in the evening. So I was like, okay, well, I've got 2 nights and I don't have anything to do. And Hamilton, I think at the time, had been in Chicago for at least a year. But you could get tickets. I think my ticket was like $75. It was a Thursday night show. And I was like, I'm going to go see Hamilton. And I should have gone and seen it twice. I could have, but the tickets for Friday night were more expensive. But which is like, I don't know, a third of the price of the cheapest seats you could get in New York. And this is after it had been on I mean, it had been on Broadway for several years at the time and was, starting to travel around the country. Anyway, so I got to see, actually, I got to see the Alexander Hamilton cast member was actually supposed to be starting his stint as the Broadway AHAM like last month. And because of COVID, Broadway's not open. And so he is not working right now, but I'm really looking forward to Broadway opening back up so I can see him on Broadway as well. And we can talk about that later, but I liked his singing and acting a little bit better than LMM's, but
Whoa. Already starting hot takes.
I know. It's like, that's like, it's like, saying to the Lord, like, hey, I know you created everything, but this is a little better, like, you know what I mean? Like, like the creator of the like the whole thing, wrote the whole thing. And, so it's really hard to say that, but, man, it was really good. It was really good.
We need to revisit that later because the internet is on fire about whether or not Lin-Manuel Miranda should be the one playing Alexander.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So we've established Adrienne went, Daniel stayed. He was not in the room where it happened.
He was not.
Where it happened.
Okay, so you asked about my takeaways, my big picture takeaways. By way of opening statement, I will say the thing that makes this show so powerful for me is that I realize the cast being an all black cast for what was, or almost all black cast for what was historically largely a white, in reality, largely a white turn of events or period of time in our nation's history.
Yeah.
It forces you to consider race as it overlays all the things that they're discussing about our nation's history and freedom and all the different themes and values that are discussed. And so for me, it made me realize, I heard someone say this, the story of Hamilton and the fight for freedom from the British is akin to the struggle for freedom and dignity that African Americans experience in this nation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of ways, America is sort of our British empire.
And we should talk about too the difference in timing, right? Because I think one of the things that struck me on that topic, watching it and thinking about when it was first written, is he puts the show together really during essentially the Obama administration, and the show opens. The show opens. In February of 2015, Off-Broadway moves to Broadway later that year. So kind of still in that last portion of the Obama administration where, so as the show is being presented and, it's a different climate. Not that we were in a different place really as a nation, but in terms of the news and in terms of the public kind of coverage around these issues, it was a different period of time than fast forward 4 years later when this goes to Disney Plus and on a kind of a replay now for people to see who don't get to go to Broadway. And it's a totally different dynamic now. And you watch it, I think I could see watching it live in 2015, watching it again in 2019 or 20, and it's just the contexts are completely different from like just a public conversation standpoint. Maybe not the root of anything, but if that makes sense, but the public conversation around everything. Yeah. A couple of things, and I'll jump into stats here too a little bit that we usually jump off with. A couple of other just like themes, and especially as we think about, the audience of lawyers that are often listening to this, is that I appreciate as well, is the power of words. That Hamilton's power was the art of writing. And at the end of the day, that's really, what at its core a lawyer is the use of words to make change. I appreciated, and it came back to it several times, that, while he felt like he needed to be out on the battlefield and needed a command to lead in order to be, in his own mind considered, the person that he ought to be, Washington saw and others saw that his ability to advocate and write and advocate were his strengths, and that's what he was best at, and that's what they needed him for. They didn't need him to go out and lead on the battlefield. They had other people they could do. That's something that I kept coming back to throughout the notes I was thinking through this was that.
Can I piggyback off of that for a second?
Yeah.
So have you heard the Hamilton mixtape?
Pieces of it. Yes.
Okay. So there's a song on there called Wrote My Way Out.
I don't know if I've heard that one.
It takes that portion of The Eye of the Hurricane where he talks about how he wrote his way out, and he blows that out and turns it into I get that. Like, it really speaks to me. It is powerful in my mind. So man, the mixtape to me.
Tell us what that is. So for people that aren't familiar with the mixtape.
So I don't know when this popped off, but at some point in time, Lin-Manuel released an entire second album that is basically a hip hop version of what is already on the musical. And he's brought in lots of different artists. The Roots are on here, Busta Rhymes, Nas, Watsky, Shockwave, Ben Folds, Kelly Clarkson, Alicia Keys, Snow the Product, Jimmy Fallon and the Roots, do You'll Be Back.
So good.
Of course.
It's Wiz Khalifa, John Legend, Common, Ingrid Michaelson, it's amazing. And so this one song, it's third song in, and it's a reimagining of it's even modernizing even more what is already a relevant story, and it's just powerful. I think it's almost as poignant as the production itself.
That's awesome. So a couple of just quick notes to lead us off. So as I said, this show was created, and I'll get into the origin story in just a second, but was put on Broadway in 2015, and it then, for the movie purpose, obviously premiered, like we said, July 4th or July 3rd this year. It was originally scheduled for a theatrical release in 2021, and they went ahead and moved it up and put it on the streaming service because of COVID. So on the box office side at the theater in New York, and I suppose around Chicago as well too, it is now the 6th all-time highest grossing show ever, $659 million. By the way, Lion King is all-time number one, $1.68 billion. So it's got a ways to go, but it just got started. I imagine Hamilton will be around
4 years versus
for 20
decades.
something. Yeah. But it's already ahead of so many shows that people are familiar with that have been around for decades. And so it's well on its way. And Disney did purchase the rights to the movie version for $75 million, which at the time was believed to be one of the larger acquisitions that Disney had made in that variety. It is based on, in part, on Ron Chernow's 2004 biography of Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, that Lin-Manuel read while he was on vacation from performing in his other show, In the Heights, which is a topic we can talk about a little bit because that's going to be a movie soon as well. But
Did you, by the way, have you seen that book, the Hamilton book?
Yes.
Oh yeah,
it's on my
It's a
Amazon wish
dictionary.
list.
yeah. I've not read it. I've not.
My wife is reading through it now, but like it is not a quick read.
It's not a weekender.
No. So yeah, just the fact that on vacation, hey, we're going to thumb through this one. So something else that kind of caught in terms of the origin of it that I thought was interesting, I didn't know about, but it was very public, so probably people did, is so Lin-Manuel goes to the White House in 2009 and to perform at like the White House poetry night or something like that, kind of spoken word, spoken word, whatever. And he gets up there and does kind of I would say still somewhat raw version of Alexander Hamilton, the first song, just him and the pianist who was his partner for this with the music. And you know what? I don't know if you guys had watched that back. He does it as the Burr character does, obviously, because he's the only one up there singing. And so he does all the parts. So, in the movie, in the show, you see it's like 3 or 4 different parts that sing the main verse, verses, whatever. And actually Hamilton didn't sing hardly any. So Lin-Manuel does the whole thing. And when he starts to sing, what's funny, as I watched it, and I probably would have had the same reaction. The Obamas, the rest of the crowd that are watching, they almost, I think, react to it as if it's like a comedic sketch.
Yeah.
Like a shtick. Like, this is, I kind of wrote this because I was going to do the White House poetry thing. I take a founding father and do something fun with it. And that's the reaction from the crowd. That was my impression of their reaction to it. Like, what is, like, because when it gets to the part of the song where it's the first time that he says, "What's your name, man?" Alexander Hamilton, the crowd laughs.
Well, the word got around. They said, "This kid is insane, man." Took up a collection just to send him to the mainland. Get your education, don't forget from whence you came. And the world is gonna know your name. What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton. His name is Alexander Hamilton. And there's a million things he hasn't done. But just you wait, just you wait.
Yeah.
Just laughs. Like,
yeah.
And part of it's his delivery because he's kind of a quirky guy and everything. But I definitely think nobody else in that room, unless they already knew, had any idea where he was going with that song and therefore then with that production. And it's 5-6 years later before it gets to the finish line. Yeah. Incredible to watch that now. And just the pianist, you can see in his eyes, he's watching Lin-Manuel saying, "This is incredible what he's doing up there." And people all appreciated the song, I think, and knew it was great. I don't think anyone thought he was really going to put together a show completely around Alexander Hamilton like that. It was crazy.
Yeah. I had the same read.
All right. So it obviously cleaned up all the awards, Tonys, Grammys, an Emmy. What's the Tracy Jordan
EGOT.
The EGOT from 30 Rock. Tracy Jordan's always trying to get the EGOT, the Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony. So I think one short right now for Lin-Manuel on the Oscar. But he'll get there, I'm sure. There's a lot of we'll spend some time, I'm sure, on Lin-Manuel just in general. But obviously he writes it. I mean, I think out of how many songs, 40 something, he's the sole composer of almost all, close to all. And then plays Hamilton. And I guess we'll just use the version that we just saw on the Disney Plus and the main cast from Broadway that started it in New York. So, and I'll probably not get all these names correct. Philippa Sue plays Eliza. Leslie Odom Jr., who we love, plays Aaron Burr. Renee Elise Goldsberry plays Angelica Schuyler, who in the second watch to me actually stood out as maybe the most talented of all of them. I really like Angelica Schuyler's character, and Renee Goldsberry plays that. Christopher Jackson playing George Washington. Daveed Diggs is the other standout to me. Playing both Lafayette and Thomas Jefferson. And then I just don't even want to try.
Yeah, no.
Mulligan
You go
Madison.
ahead.
No.
No, I want to hear it.
No, I don't even know if I spelled it right in my sheet of notes.
Sound it out.
I just don't want to try. I'm too afraid. Robert, help.
Why are you looking to me to
Adrienne, somebody, because you're the one egging me on to do it myself.
I'm gonna go with Okiredi Onadawin.
I'll take it. For sure. I'll take it. Playing Mulligan and Madison. And I want to talk about the dual roles too, today. Cause I think that's important. Jonathan Groff, as King George III, who I'm sure we'll talk about. Anthony Ramos as John Lawrence, and also Philip Hamilton, the son of Alexander Hamilton, and then Jasmine Jones as Peggy Schuyler, and also Maria Reynolds. So that's and then obviously there's an ensemble cast as well, but that's the group. So what about from the cast? Adrienne, I kind of hinted at a couple of my favorites, but give me some cast.
I mean,
favorites.
So this is the problem with Hamilton, is that it could be a 5-hour podcast going into all the things. I mean, there's so many trails to go off of, because it was written so ingeniously and it was casted so intentionally and so well. So I am a Jefferson Lafayette diehard. I think the delivery, the lines, and the original casting was spot on for that. I also really enjoy George Washington's character in the original cast. King George is just everything was done so intentionally, and you can see the fingerprints of not just intentionality, but like so many meanings, and the dual roles were phenomenal. And I remember the first time watching it live being like, wait a minute, I've already seen this person. He looks like the other person. But then only catching on after I left the theater, and then kind of listening, because before I'd seen it live, I had heard the whole soundtrack and had listened to it many times in the car and sung along. And then to see it live, which is funny because watching it on the televised, I really did kind of benefit from the subtitles. People were like, watch it with subtitles. I'm like, you're going to take away from the moment. Don't watch it with subtitles. But being there, I never had a problem hearing the lyrics, but I never had time to marinate with it. But the visual with the lyrics to the songs I'd been hearing, I pieced some of it together. After leaving the theater and kind of thinking about it, you start thinking about like how the different roles play into one another, and how characters can play two roles and you recognize them, but their characters are different enough that you're like, oh yeah, no, that's definitely Jefferson and that's definitely Lafayette. But to be that good at what you do that you can make someone believe like, okay, I know this is the same person, but you're two completely different people. I don't know. There's so many paths I could go with that, but this is a few thoughts.
We're going to hit some more of that later. Robert, any casting?
Man, I'm in the same. I mean, Lafayette and Jefferson. I mean, Daveed Diggs just killed that dichotomy.
Oh,
slayed it.
Awesome. Like,
I mean, to go from rapping with a French accent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
To, like this caricature of Prince is what I thought of in my mind.
I think I saw somewhere, maybe you saw it in the notes, that he, I think that he did base some of his performance on Prince. I'm pretty sure I saw that.
Really?
Like Prince was one of his influences for that role.
You said that. I'm like, I
so
see
that's right.
It.
If you did, I saw that in the research. Yeah, no, for sure. He said it.
I don't know if it's because of the purple made me think about it.
Yeah.
But like, I mean,
it's
he
there,
just
though.
he was everywhere. And this is the thing that I love about a good production, but Hamilton in particular. I think that this is going to be, I think Hamilton is going to be this generation's original Star Wars trilogy. And the reason why I say that is when you start looking at things like Star Wars, The Matrix, there's these big epic things that you just love, you can watch multiple times. You start thinking about, am I imagining the meaning behind this aspect, or is that something intentional that the writer did?
Yeah.
And
so many Easter eggs.
And with Lafayette and Jefferson, I'm like, so is there something that's being said here about the lovability of one person and the disdain that we have towards the other person, but they're both, elaborate characters? Or looking at Peggy, like she was just kind of like this throwaway, and then she ends up being, they paint her as a kind of like a Sheba, not Bathsheba, a Queen of Sheba, kind of a, like she's the temptress sort of a thing. And so, like, is there some sort of message there
when she's playing the other character? Yeah. That dichotomy between the characters playing two roles.
There's just so many
so
parents.
much. I mean, you think about the we talked about like Lawrence and Philip Hamilton, both die in the show, and there's some crossover.
Yeah, and it's even referenced in the beginning. Me, I shot him, and me, I fought for him, and it's the two characters. But from the minutia of like the Lafayette, Jefferson, like there's not just the French on a surface level, the tie to the French, but the fighting on the battlefield. And then fighting via his words and in the, in the cabinet duels. That's a whole other, that's like the best. Yeah. I'm like, I would be in politics if this is how it worked. But, and I know we kind of already talked about it, but just the genius and intentionality of picking characters and saying, we are going to write this from a minority standpoint, and we're going to elevate the roles of, you're going to see African Americans and Puerto Ricans and like women and all these things where you see but when you look in your history books, and it goes back this whole thread of like, who's going to tell your story, who gets to tell your story, and how important words are, and how in the end, Hamilton gets shot, and Eliza, who easily could have burned everything, considering, is the reason that a lot of his writings were published and that they're still around. He's a wordy guy. But, so to take these roles and to say, this is what our country was built on. What you see in your history books is a bunch of creepy looking dudes with wigs on that made all the decisions. But when you see Hamilton, it's this whole perspective. It really does flip it. It flips it on its head. And it's like, is history being flipped on its head? Or are we just seeing a side of history that no one's really saying? Like, who's telling the story? And I feel like Lin-Manuel Miranda's genius is that it's like, I have a way to tell this story, but also tell this untold story. You know what I mean? And to kind of uncover the layers. It really is just, I've never walked out of a musical and been like, I want to read every piece of paper I can get on the backgrounds of like, what happened after, and digging into Eliza's life post Hamilton and the work that she did to start orphanages and help raise money to build the Washington Monument, and all these different characters to go on and say, I'm going to be an outspoken person against slavery, and I'm going to take up these different causes that our country was built on, and now trying to dismantle that it's literally taking. Still, I'm saying taking because it's still happening, hundreds of years to kind of unravel. The casting in and of itself, regardless of who, plays the roles, like the way that the show is cast is just incredible. Yeah. Genius, really.
The last couple of things I was going to mention on the cast is I don't think that it works as well if you don't have a center of gravity from like a stability standpoint in Christopher Jackson's George Washington.
Yeah.
Because like he is sort of like this just stoic anchor, of which I feel like, you know, and maybe this was true, you know, in the real way that it all happened as well, but at least in the production, I think, you know, he kind of allows for Hamilton and Madison and Jefferson and all of them to kind of, you know, go to the farthest outreaches of what they want to do and kind of have their ideas, however off the wall they are. I mean, him being kind of the, okay, here's in the battle rap cabinet meetings, here you go. It's, you know, you say everything you want, get it all out. And then ultimately, you know, I'm just going to sit here and make the decision and move forward. You know, like him kind of being the arbiter and ultimately being the decision maker on so many of those things. And like, I think you had to have the right actor to be strong enough to be believable as he could hold all this together and keep these guys all together, even though they're so different in the way that they view things and all of their ideas. It's something that I didn't notice the first time through as much, but the second time watching, I just thought that about the George Washington character and how important Christopher Jackson was to just kind of being the, you know, like when you watch like a sitcoms or other things, you kind of have the straight man that sort of like allows for the crazy around it. It sort of is, and I felt like he was almost kind of that in a Hamilton way, like in a different way. But that was a really important, I think, role for him.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
And obviously, those of us all with kids, not everybody listening has kids, but Jonathan Groff being Kristoff from Frozen, like it's like to have him kind of be
not just kids, he's like the Mindhunter guy, which is like none of our kids have seen.
No, I know, but so some people watch but yeah, that's with that. It's interesting to kind of see him pop in there as King George and do his thing. And
oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all, and when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. Da 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 da
da. And it definitely is a moment of levity every time he steps out for the audience, and so good stuff.
Which is funny because it's like the oppressor, and it's it's done in such a British way where it's like, you know, I'm going to kill your friends and family, but I'm going to be so polite and so gracious and so kind. He really does a great job. And I will say the Andrew Call, who does the Chicago, or played the Chicago version of King George, did an incredible job as well. They're just a fun character and cast. Oh man, it's amazing. So good. Okay.
Yeah. The last thing I want to mention on Lin-Manuel before not the last thing, but at least for this section, is just, just thinking about his, at least for me, I don't know about for you guys. So I didn't know anything about Lin-Manuel Miranda, until Hamilton came out. And then I realized I did know about Lin-Manuel, but it was just from a couple of appearances on the show House, where he plays just in a couple of episodes, a character called Alvy, who is in where House goes for treatment for drug abuse, and Alvy's kind of this kind of crazy character who befriends him, and they have this. So Hugh Laurie and Lin-Manuel have this back and forth in House, a couple of episodes, which culminates in a talent show for the whole wing of the ward that the two of them are up there rapping together.
I know my secret, sit back and let me explain it. My pop split, mama got sick, cliche, ain't it? Now I'm a manic Hispanic, I'm trying to make it work, but the doctors think I'm lazy.
My roommate is a jerk.
Dr. House is in the house, y'all. Give it up for Dr. House to the stage, y'all. Paging Dr. House to the stage, y'all. Yeah, so tell me, doctor, what I really gotta know. How do I get better?
Just do a talent show.
Oh, well, I guess I'm just a mess. Yes, preach it to me, brother. A life of restlessness.
But at least we have each other.
Oh, we got each other. Oh, we got each other. Like two brothers from another mother. Duck and roll, cover, Ward 6.
And it's great. And so when I started becoming aware of Lin-Manuel, I was like, oh yeah. And I went back to, man, that was a great character, and he did a great job with that. And then to come to find out later that Hugh Laurie is who gives Lin-Manuel the idea for the King George song, the breakup song to the colonies. So Lin-Manuel tells Hugh Laurie, hey, I want to write this breakup song from King George to the colonies. And Hugh Laurie looks back at him and says, you'll be back. And that's it. And they thought it was hilarious. And that was the genesis of the You'll Be Back song.
That's hilarious.
It's pretty great. But for Lin-Manuel, obviously the other pieces are, he's got to deal with Disney. So he's done a lot of Disney stuff now, including wrote most of the music in Moana, which has got a lot of great music in it for sure. And then wrote some music for some of the Star Wars pieces over the last couple of movies. So he's
Mary Poppins
played
Returns.
Mary Poppins Returns. Yeah, I played Jack in Mary Poppins Returns, and I'm sure he'll be doing a lot more, as well as we mentioned In the Heights, which was his first big Broadway play that he wrote and starred in as well, and it's going to be a movie. And I think that's already been bumped back to next year as well, but I think it was supposed to come out this year. So, he's like basically our age. He's 40-ish, 38.
Don't put me in 40-ish yet. I got a year.
Oh man. Wow.
The water's fine. Join us.
Don't put
just
me
come
there
on
yet.
in. Jump in. Lynn's here. Lynn's playing. I'm just excited.
I'll buy anything he's selling for sure.
I don't know, but I'm just really excited to it'll be hard to, I'm sure, like any artist that has something like Hamilton, it's really hard to probably ever top it, if not impossible. But I'm just really excited for the next 40 years of Lin-Manuel Miranda's creation, whatever that is. If it's
What comes next?
yeah. There you go. All right, let's take a quick break to share a few of the exciting job opportunities that we are currently searching for here at Varsity Search. First, there's a Chambers-ranked construction boutique firm in Dallas looking to grow their litigation team with a 3 to 12-year lawyer, a couple of positions there, actually. Then we also have a family law opportunity in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And finally, there's a business litigation boutique in Dallas looking for a 2 to 5-year associate. And these are great opportunities that don't require Senate confirmation. So if you or someone you know might have interest in one of these opportunities, please email me, Daniel@varsitysearch.com, or go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers for more information or to apply. Let's get back to Hamilton. All right. Do some awards. Got a few here. Best lawyering. See, this is where we're going to try to, put.
This has me. This whole award thing has me all messed up in the head because I'm trying to put people in boxes.
That's
and
good.
in Hamilton, you can't put people in a box.
Sure you can. Watch me.
What?
So, best lawyering. I've just got a couple because, this is not a traditional lawyer movie. We don't have a bunch of traditional legal arguments, but we do have some.
But it is so legal.
It is. No, that's why we're going to do this. So, I've got a couple of just nominations for best lawyering. And the first would just be pick your cabinet battle, the rap battles. I think any of that you could include. And then also, you do have a fairly significant negotiation between Hamilton and then Jefferson and Madison in the exchange of getting his national financial system and debt assumption banking set up in exchange for moving the capital to Washington, D.C. or to the South. And that's we were referencing before, being in the room where it happened. Burr's on the outside looking in while that's supposedly happening in the show. That's that's negotiation. That's, I think, tremendous lawyering. And we should say, so Hamilton's a lawyer, Burr's a lawyer, Jefferson, and I think Madison is not, if I have that right. Which may come into play with our eligibility for future awards for some of these categories. Any other super lawyering that we saw?
Adrienne, what do you think?
I don't see. I tend to on these topics. I tend to, smile and nod. Talk less, smile more.
Which makes you a perfect lawyer.
I'm lawyer by marriage.
There ought to be an honorary degree. Yeah, I mean, man, I agree with you. I think that's really it seems like the masterful strategy stroke in the entire play. I mean, there's just I loved the actual courtroom scene when they're doing the murder trial. Burr and Hamilton are defending the first murder trial in the nation's history, and there's that opening statement by Hamilton, and he talks about, do you understand what's happening here in our nation? So I liked that a lot. The delivery of it. I mean, I'm looking for an opportunity to deliver an opening statement in prose form now. So I'm going to give it to Hamilton, and for that.
Let me know when you do that. I'll be in court for that one for sure. I would.
Hey, I have written briefs wherein I referenced Back to the Future and J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
So we've got the Aaron Brockovich Award for the best discovery, investigative moment, prep work, whatever. On this, one of the things I jotted down was this is not a positive, but Jefferson and Madison not being a lawyer, and Burr dig deep to out Hamilton's infidelity so they can have leverage on him and keep him out of the presidency, basically, and that's what they did. And so that's pretty dirty in terms of but sometimes discovery and investigations are dirty, right? So
remember when infidelity would keep you from being a president?
Who would have thunk? Gone are the days of chivalry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, that literally when Jefferson's like, never gonna be president, and he just like
he's celebrating that he's never gonna be president.
It's so great. Oh, it's so good.
The Jefferson character is great in that whole
I would agree with that one.
Yeah, and then our normal awards for best judge and best witness, the Chamberlain Haller Award and the Colonel Jessup Award.
Yeah.
Do y'all have anything for those? I didn't actually. I kind of moved on after that just because we're not in the traditional trial scene, but
yeah, I mean, I feel like Washington feels like a judge.
Yeah,
he does, right?
That's weird. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
and he's judging those rap battles. And we were talking earlier. I made the case that the rap battles were some of the best lawyering, and they're just kind of going back and forth and trying to persuade, Washington. Actually, you know what? You said that. That was the judge moment. We've got a juror moment later on, and I think I actually have George Washington as the juror in that. But he really is both. It's basically like a bench trial. All right,
you
cool.
know what? On that subject, I want to go back. I have another submission for best lawyering.
Do it.
It's Hamilton saying, "Why don't we ask King Louis's head what he thinks?"
Yeah,
he's holding up like this.
Yeah. Do whatever you want. I'm super dead.
You know what? It's like Adrienne was saying earlier, when you have watched it or either live or on the stream once, you maybe hear the lyrics, and even if you've listened to the soundtrack, but you don't have that opportunity to marinate in them. And then you also, and sometimes some of the lyrics are so fast, like you're trying to hear what that was said like 2 seconds ago, and you miss what's being said right now. And I feel like that happened to me a lot, especially the first time through. And so therefore the second time through, the scene you were just referencing with Louis and the head and everything, I don't really even I didn't remember him saying it the first time I watched it. But I did like hear it this time, and I laughed out loud while we were watching it. And so you're absolutely right. That's a great one. All right, so let's take our recess. I've got so much in the recess this time because so much stuff doesn't fit into our normal categories.
All recess.
But we should start with our tests. Robert, tell us what our tests are.
All right, so we've got, first of all, the Bechdel test. And this is simply whether we have a woman talking to another woman about something that's not a man.
Yeah. tough sledding here, I think. I think it's tough sledding.
It really is.
The bar is so low.
Yeah, but
and it just rarely ever.
Yeah, but start thinking through how many of those sister conversations didn't deal with Hamilton.
We're all.
I mean, even when the sisters come to town, they start talking about how Daddy says.
Daddy.
Yeah. Yep.
I did not have anything for this in terms of when that happened. It's possible that it did, because it's a 2.5 hour show. Like I said, with the number of words per minute in this show are off in somewhere other land. Like, it's so many words. So it's possible that it has slipped by me, but
I don't know. You really do have three sisters, one of which has like not any lines. Peggy. And then, even the two girls, when Philip, when he comes down and is like talking, there's that scene, and you've got like the two girls, actually one of which who plays Peggy and Maria also plays a like Greek chorus person that has like one other line. But they're talking about Philip Hamilton. And the sisters are either always talking about Hamilton or their dad, or, yeah.
And they're rarely even talking to each other.
Right.
Yeah, no, there's not that
They're
many
usually talking to a male character. So, yeah, it's very, very few and far between.
Rough.
But I think that's also...
I think Angelica would have had plenty of conversations with other women about things not dealing with men. We just don't ever see them in the show.
But I also think, part of that is part of the time.
For sure.
We're still in it. Part of it is part of the time where like the world revolves around, like powerful white dudes, like that. How are we still there? You'd think like after hundreds of years, but here we are.
It's 1800, ladies. Tell your husband, vote for Burr.
But it's like, I think part of it is the nature of the story that they're telling. Yeah. And so, from a perspective, but the fact that Lin-Manuel Miranda still chose these specific characters to kind of highlight, even though it's in kind of a man's world still, and to say, these female characters, to either highlight something about, the Peggy Maria character just kind of being tossed aside. Like, no one tells their stories. Their story is Maria Reynolds' character is told from a 12-page paper that Alexander Hamilton wrote to defend himself. And we never get to hear her story in the history books or, in the musical. And what does that say about, just women in general? And so she gets painted as this character when it's like, bro, you had a whole year to break it off. Like, how about no, And so it makes it hard to kind of have those roles. That's a hard, like the Bechdel test. in this one. But yeah, I feel like there are very few movies. Have you had any that have passed the Bechdel?
Yeah, we've had a couple.
There was one moment in Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
Oh, and how do we evaluate the Callahan hair test here?
All right, yes. So the Callahan hair test, also known as the Callahan test or the diversity test. All we need here is one minority talking to another minority about something that is not a white person.
So this is tricky because if you know nothing about history, if you have never heard anything about American history, never looked at a history book, and you see Hamilton. So my 5-year-old thinks that, the founding fathers are people of color, of different races, because she's never looked at, it's like they haven't looked in the history books to know any different. And so to them, they would say this passes. But in terms of like history, not portrayed by characters, I would say it doesn't pass the test. Right?
That's the question. So my thought is it does pass the test. And I kind of went back and forth on it for a lot of the reasons and the obvious ones here, like that you were just saying. But I think if we're evaluating a work of art, a production, a movie, a play,
1,000%.
And we're highlighting or we're looking at, whether, there were conversations between people of color about other people of color. Like that happened in this show. Like everybody on there is, except for when they're talking about King George, then, who actually was the only white character in the show. Not because he himself was really white, because it was Jonathan Groff. So like, I mean, as a production, I think it passes the test. But I mean, I definitely could understand the argument that it doesn't, because the actual characters were not. But also, kind of the look at the test is to see, are creators of art trying to create these conversations and focus is around people of color, people that aren't white. Like he did that. Like the whole purpose of the play, in some ways, is that, of the show is that. So I'm going to give him a thumbs up. Even if it's like maybe it's not the normal way we would say it passes, but to me it does.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I agree with you. I have a twist on it, though.
Do it.
Okay.
This is on stage. This is the minority cast, the minority as far as, you and I and everyone that's watching this, we know that Black people, Puerto Ricans, the women, these are minorities. Okay, but in this world of the performance, the minority characters are the majority. Like you said, only King George is a non-minority. So in the world of the performance, everyone that we identify in real time today as a minority is in the majority. So you only have... in this world, presumably, if you were to blow this out, like everyone in the world, or 90% of all the people that were inhabiting this world would be Black.
Got it.
So there in that world, it's only Black people talking to Black people.
Yeah.
And you see what I'm saying? So
I see where you're going.
It's like you need another actor or actress that's white for King George to talk to about another white person in the show in order to sort of pass the original version of the test.
Okay. That's
the twist, right? That's where you're going. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, I think it's the girl that plays the bullet that comes up and tells him, when he comes out and he's like, what? I didn't know you could do that. Like, I didn't know he's, where George Washington is just going to like not run again. He's like, what is that? I didn't know that was something you could do.
But isn't she Black too?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I feel like at one point someone comes up to him. It's a white guy with brown hair, but I don't know if he says something.
Is it the guy that played the farmer?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of gets up on the little stool, right? Or the box and
yes.
does a little thing.
So I think that same character comes out, but I don't know if he actually says anything to King George or if he just hands him a piece of paper. So because the girl that plays the bullet would not count because she can't. Well, I mean, she does talk to him, like whispers in his ear to tell him, John Adams. John Adams. That's so great.
Yeah.
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 So I guess not. Yeah.
But even if it was a white man talking to a white man, they're still talking about a black character,
right?
Which we never met, right. But presumably he would still be a black character.
Okay, that's a twist. I hadn't thought about it that way.
It rewinds back to the actual wording of the test itself. Is it one minority of the population that we're seeing talking to another minority of the population we're seeing about another, or is it literally a person of color talking to another person of color, person that's white? Because if it's the latter, then that passes, and if it's the former, it doesn't, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess we have to iron out our test.
Clearly.
Oh, but Adrienne, before we forget, because I'm not sure everyone would catch it, what's the bullet?
Oh, so I didn't catch it so when I saw it live, the character, so I guess I need to pull her name up. And there's articles all over the internet now, but there it was an unwritten character written to the show. So if you watch Hamilton, in the one that's on Disney, it's the African American girl that has her hair's bleached at the front. But you will see her throughout the entire production in different points. And
Ariana DeBose.
Yes. And she draws your attention when I first watched it on the Disney Plus with the original cast. She draws your attention because she's an incredible dancer. But they use her throughout the movie and they refer to her character as the Bullet. And I remember watching it live, and the person when Aaron Burr fires the gun, you see this person basically holding a bullet and moving across the stage. And in my head, I just assumed that was imagery, because when you're watching a show and this dramatic moment that's drawn out and a whole song is done as the bullet is shot from the gun, that pre-notion before it's actually shot at the end of the show, where I'm like, oh, that's just so that you can see that it's the bullet and that it's moving through time as he's going through this deal. And then once the show airs on Disney, this whole thing comes out and you start seeing her everywhere. And it's like she's handing Alexander Hamilton the pen before he writes a letter. And she's in these little moments, and you see her before Philip dies. And it's just this hint of death throughout the production that is part of the genius of these tiny, small little Easter eggs that are planted throughout the production, that you could watch this hundreds of times and see something new and get a deeper grasp and go peel another layer of the onion back, that you would be so brilliant to create a character out of death, essentially, and that it's kind of coming for each of these characters in different ways, and how it kind of touches each thing, and then how this one letter is projected, it kind of projects this, what's going to happen next. It starts the ball rolling. Anyway, that probably could have been talked about in the characters section, but it's fascinating.
No, I meant to bring it up earlier. So when you mentioned it, it reminded me. A couple other things. Robert, I think you mentioned earlier when we were talking about in the Bechtel test about the Daddy Doesn't Need to Know Going to the City song. So that, for whatever reason, of all the songs that our kids have listened to, that's the one that our youngest daughter has latched onto.
Eliza, Peggy, Eliza.
doesn't
Of
need
course.
to know. No, Daddy needs to know everything. I don't know. Be careful what you have your kids listen to. They'll catch the worst possible.
It's like the
Course.
the few F bombs they're going to
know.
pick up on.
Does anyone else, by the way, like sing, like the tune of these songs to like get their kids to go to bed or something like that?
It must be nice comes into my head all that, like anytime, like it must be nice if your kids listen to you, kind of, and it'll just get the song going. You'll kind of do a little deal.
Yeah, like every night, like there's some variation. It's like, go to bed. It's what I said. I don't want to see you while you come up. Okay,
Yeah.
No, last night I was putting Brooklyn to bed, and I went up to her and said, what I said, you are the BROOKLYNHARE, you see?
Spell out the name. I am the ALEXANDER. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently.
That's hilarious.
What are you doing, Dad? You're officially weird. Yes. It only took her till third grade to find out I was weird. No, so there's that. And then let's talk about duels for a minute. Just duels.
Yeah. Are you getting to the, like, when ever has a vice president shot someone in a duel? Like, is that it?
Well,
Imagine a duel nowadays.
Cheney shot somebody.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
Like, wait, has a sitting vice
Not as
president
a duel, but yeah,
ever,
I did shoot someone.
like, shot someone, challenged someon to a duel?
So I did pull a couple of things about duels because I was just really curious about dueling after this. So there are actually there's something called Code Duelo, which is the rules for dueling. There's 25 of them. Obviously, the song grabs 10 of them to put into the song, and because that's tracking with another influence.
Dual commandments.
On the Dual Commandments. But here, I pulled some interesting. So people may know this from history, but in 1842, Abraham Lincoln accepted a duel while he was an Illinois state senator by the Illinois state auditor, James Shields. So this is like, state government, conflict here. They actually got out to this island in Missouri and were about to duel when their seconds, which if you picked up on the show, the seconds are kind of the intermediaries to try to pull down the heat and end it without shooting, were able to convince them to back down. And it was some dispute on whether Lincoln had actually written these critical articles about the auditor, and they were able to convince the other guy that he hadn't. And so, but Lincoln was close to firing in a duel, but he didn't fire. And then a couple others. The last one that I found anyway, I'm sure there were more, but the last one that's noted is 1882, when Louisiana State Treasurer Edward Burke was seriously wounded by a guy named C. Harrison Parker, who was the editor of the New Orleans Daily Picayune, the newspaper in New Orleans, after supposedly he had published some unflattering remarks about Burke. So, you just take it out to the street, right? And get the duel going. So there were 18 states that had outlawed dueling by 1859, though it was still practiced in some form in states until just after the Civil War. Basically, at the turn of the century, around 1900 is when it was officially kind of
turned to lawsuits. That's
out
like a
of
civil
favor.
versus. This is all like, you slandered me. Let's duel.
Yeah, well, now we'll just go for money instead. But yeah, and then, as you mentioned, Adrienne, so yeah, but then the song itself, the 10 Dual Commandments, was inspired by that Code Duelo I mentioned earlier, but then also a Notorious B.I.G. song, 10 Crack Commandments, and then also supposedly the actual 10 Commandments. Yeah.
Before you move on to your next point, how do we feel about duels?
That's what I want to see. I want to have the duel conversation.
I mean,
they're clearly barbaric, but on one hand, I'm kind of here for it.
Yeah. No, that's And really, like, when you're listening to the 10 dual commandments, you're like, okay, so this isn't just like, when you see movies and they're like, let's duel, and then they just meet in the street and turn around and shoot. I'm like, no, this is like a process. And then you come to find out it's a legitimate process, and it's like, we're going to work it out. And if you can't come to an agreement, and it's referenced several times in the show, where it's like, most of the time this is kind of where it ends. And a lot of times, and it's like
where there's a whole process to try to not have the duel end in someone.
Well, and then stating your intent to not shoot, like that whole. Yeah. There are several with Philip. Before he preps his son to do a duel, and he's like, oh, if they say they're not going to do this, then you have to honor your word and whatever, And then with the duel with Burr and Hamilton, he kind of like is reliving it in his head. And I feel like there's this organized process for it. And I'm like, if you're going to duel someone and you accept a duel, can you say no? Can you be like, no, I'm going to pass on the duel?
Pass.
Well, yeah, that's so then I'm like, if you're both willing to duel, then, whatevs. If you are fine. And he goes through the whole deal. Like Aaron Burr is like giving this whole deal. Like he's like, I know he's a solid shot. I know he's hyping himself up. Like he's going to shoot me. He's going to not put his gun in the air. He's going to shoot me, and he's going to hit.
Like he puts his glasses on to even sharpen up his eyes and his aim. Like that was one thing. Man. Yeah.
Just to go through. So I think it's not a terrible way to settle an argument.
So far, two of the three of us have expressed positive feelings about duels.
But this is also
I did not see this going this way. This is so funny.
This is also coming from someone who's like, having a conversation with Daniel before this all started. I'm like, but do we even really need guns? Like, does anyone need guns? So I'm like I'm the least conflict person on planet Earth.
So, here's my hot take on duels. I feel like if they were all about swords or maces or axes, I just think there would be a lot less of them. It's one thing to turn 10 paces and shoot somebody, but if you've got to stare down the other end of a blade.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Sorry, this is referencing a whole other conversation that has to do with firearms.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about like, I don't want to get in the middle of like how y'all figure out who does dishes and stuff. But I'm just saying that like, if you really wanted to go at somebody.
Yeah.
You almost should have to use a sword, because then it's going to be painful if I lose.
Right.
The duel.
All right. The last thing I have, just sort of, and if anyone else has other things that aren't neatly in our other categories, Adrienne mentioned this earlier, but I think one of the things that was interesting in the second act of the show, and as they were kind of putting the government together and going through some of the elections, was just the difference of how they elected the president and vice president back in the early years of the country versus what we do now.
I like it. I like the old school way.
You like the old school way?
Yeah, it's great.
It kind of forces cooperation.
Yeah, it's like it's a built-in check and balance almost, to be like, we have the guy who wins, and then whoever comes in second, that's your boy or girl.
Yeah. So. Yeah, the electors, the electoral college was there, and the electors would vote for two candidates. They weren't specifically for either president or vice president. They just put forward two names, and then the one with the most names won, and the name with second most votes was the vice president. And oftentimes in those early years, it would be people of different parties, as you could imagine. And so that ultimately became something of a problem. and so they ahead of the election kind of that we see play out in the show there was some movement in Congress to switch it to where the electors would vote for a president and for a vice president, but it didn't get through. in that election of 1800 with Jefferson and Burr. And so that's kind of where that wound up being a whole thing. And then just a few years later, they in 1804, 1805, they passed the 12th Amendment, which kind of made it more to where it is what we have today. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how that all played out and the dynamics it created between the different parties at the time, and even to think about how that would look today, if we did it that way, or in fact that it's really stayed similar to
like if we had like Donald Trump was president and Hillary Clinton was vice president.
Yeah, the problem is this: there's no power in the vice presidency, so they would. They're told to be sidelined. Right?
Except if someone keels over, then they become the president. And that's the thing. Like there's so much fear. Or not necessarily fear, but like so many decisions are like, I feel like there have been elections where I'm like, I don't know if I'm fine with this person if they're president, but if something happens and this person's in charge, then we got a problem. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there have been a few in the past where I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work out, and that it makes people second guess the like, okay, is this the right pairing? But if you just was like first place, second place, that's just how it works. And you got to figure it out.
Maybe that would encourage assassination attempts.
That crossed my mind. and I don't know if that was changed. I wonder what it was like in the room when that got changed, where it's like, hey, we got to figure out a way to kind of team up so we don't have these jackwagons over here, vice president.
All right, my thanks again to Robert Callahan and Adrienne Hare for joining me on today's special Movie Verdicts episode of Lone Star Lawyers. It was so good to be back together with them. And I hope that you enjoyed it as well. That was obviously part 1 of Hamilton. We will be getting part 2 out to you shortly, as well as additional Movie Verdicts episodes in the coming weeks and months. So I hope that you'll stay tuned for that. Of course, we continue to put out our Monday Mentors episodes in this same feed each and every Monday. So hopefully you're listening to that as well. All right. Well, thanks to each of you for listening to the show. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and I will talk with you next time.